10 million children in this country have dealt with a parent being in prison.
They have no constituents. There's no constituents.
Nobody.
These children.
Nobody.
And it's heartbreaking.
10 million. 10 million.
They said in the Old Testament, shall the sins of the father be visited upon their children? The answer is we still do that with very little consciousness. And if I might say, in reading your mother's fabulous book, Alive Again, which I had the honor of writing a foreword to it, when she spoke about her experiences, the love that she received from the women at MCC, the comfort that she got from her fellow inmates, that's a strange sentence. But I have a sense that she wouldn't have got through it quite so with such health if those women weren't there to embrace her.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Andreea Parc.
And I'm Dumitru.
And this is Alive Again podcast. Is a place where attorneys and other professionals meet to share real-life stories of universal challenges that shape our journeys. Today, we have with us a great human being, very close to my heart, Mr. Ronald Russo. Thank you so much for being here with us and accepting my invitation.
Andreea, as I've told you, know the way I feel about your mission and about all that you're able to do. And not only a pleasure, but it's really an honor to be part of what you're doing. If I could help in any way, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to mention how I met you and why I'm so grateful for who you are, because we were introduced by Svetlana and Schreiber, and our listeners know her from our last week episode. And it's when I came back, I called a lot of people, and very few people actually responded to my emails. You were probably the only person that I didn't know who was willing not only to answer my email, but to invite me to your office and to be open to the ideas that I had and embraced my ideas and my story with open heart and lovingly in all ways. Throughout the years, it's been more than 3 years now that I've been back and forth with my own thought process, and throughout this time you were there by my side all the time, and you were that beacon of light and of hope that if Mr. Russo believes that this idea is good, then I am on the right track. And you gave me hope by just being there and knowing that I can always give you a call and you would always give me support and an ear actually to be heard. So thank you so much for that.
Well, let me say that it really was very easy. I didn't go out of my way. Your issues are very much in my wheelhouse in terms of what I do professionally. It's really been my life. And I know the terrible scar that come from a criminal conviction. I know families who, once their father is indicted, the children don't go to birthday parties on the block anymore. It's very painful. There is this sense that there's almost a scarlet letter, that you made a mistake, and we'd like to think that you paid your just desserts, but in our society, very often that drags on for years, if not a lifetime. So this has been something that I've noticed, certainly among my own clientele, and the bottom line is that I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. On that note, that's the reason why Alexa is here.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think that a lot of people
First up, line, please.
don't really... It's for kids of people who were indicted or formerly incarcerated people. it's kind of a sense of you're not important right now. You're not the victim here, you know? Your parent is the one who's in this situation. So it's kind of, for me at least, I know I kind of not necessarily put my life on hold, but I just kind of feel like after she came out, we were kind of processing things together. And I realized that I've kind of erased like 3 years of my life and I don't really remember much from it. And I think that a lot of people who produce things about people in prison and the whole prison thing that a lot of podcasters and things like that do, they care about the fun stories of people in prison and the fights and the drama of it all. And in reality, there's real victims and people who are really hurt, and I offered myself to so many podcasts because I think that my story really helps people. And nobody took me up on that offer. Nobody wanted to hear about me. It was just, they wanted to hear the prison story. And I found my last fashion show that was my own. I dedicated the show to this nonprofit called Project Avery. And they are a foundation that helps children of currently and formerly incarcerated parents. And they do like camps and they do things and they just get people together. They get the kids together. Because 10 million children in this country have dealt with a parent being in prison.
They have no constituents. There's no constituents.
Nobody.
These children.
Nobody.
And it's heartbreaking.
10 million. 10 million.
They said in the Old Testament, shall the sins of the father be visited upon their children? The answer is we still do that with very little consciousness. And if I might say, in reading your mother's fabulous book, Alive Again, which I had the honor of writing a foreword to it, when she spoke about her experiences, the love that she received from the women at MCC, the comfort that she got from her fellow inmates, that's a strange sentence. But I have a sense that she wouldn't have got through it quite so with such health if those women weren't there to embrace her.
Right.
These people really have made a mistake. They're being punished. Do we have to gratuitously make their life more miserable? And I think that what your mother's mission is to see that people, professionals like herself, like many of my clients, they're getting into problem areas. We don't have a red light to go on and say, stop. And that's what I think, Andreea, is your mission, to try to get people to sit up and notice before it's too late.
Yes.
I do that with you.
Thank you. And now, because you mentioned the Bible and consciousness, I would like to ask you, how did you get to be an attorney?
Well,
you have a very fascinating...
Well, I don't know if it's fascinating, but my mother came to this country when she was 12 years old. She was born in Bagnoli, Italy, outside of Naples, and I am first generation, and my father, the closest he got to the law is he was a police officer. And I spent my entire youth in a Catholic seminary. I was studying for the Diocese of Brooklyn to be a priest in the diocese. And I went pretty far along. I went through my high school, my college, and 1 year of theology before I decided that God had something else in mind for me. And when I left the seminary, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I started as a social worker, and I could have gotten an MSW that was offered by the agency that I was working with. But some of my classmates who had left the seminary earlier than I had gone to law school, and they said, this is a pretty good fit. In fact, you could even use some of your Latin in law school. And I went to law school, and because of my seminary training, I think I did extremely well in law school. I was lucky enough to be the editor-in-chief of the Law Review at St. John's University School of Law. And I got out and I was clerked at the High Court of New York in Albany for the Court of Appeals. And then I went to a very large Wall Street firm, but I still, I was making more money than I thought possible, but I still wasn't satisfied. And then I became a federal prosecutor. And I met the criminal law. And in my mind, there is nothing more dramatic than dealing with people who have violated the rules of society. And that is true whether or not you're prosecuting them, which I think is the best job in the world, to be an assistant U.S. attorney or assistant district attorney, because you do justice. At least I think the vast majority of prosecutors try to do justice. And then on the other side, defending them, my practice has been almost exclusively white collar. I've tried, a double murder, but the bottom line is that most of my activity is in the area of financial crimes. Doctors who take $3.5 million from payroll protection. Contractors who wind up defrauding other companies. That has been really my experience, and it's always curious to me, when I meet my clients, they're just like me. Well, at this point, of course, they're a little younger, but they're professionals, they have licenses, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they have families. Well, one doctor had 3 teenage daughters, and you wonder, how do you get here? And that's your mission, because you've been there. So I find, God willing, will I have the strength, I think I always practice law. It's a very, very intense experience when you first meet a client and they're really on the ropes. I rarely get cases that are triable, quite frankly. Cases, the evidence is there, and I don't have to tell you. You go to trial, you only make things worse. So it's a fascinating life, and God has been very good to me. And as you mentioned, I was admitted in 1974. Last year was my 50th anniversary, and I hope to keep doing what I'm doing.
Go ahead. I have a question. So it's very clear to me that these people's stories have an impact on you, and you're very empathetic in that way. How do you process something like that? I don't even know where to begin.
Well, the good news is I'm not an oncologist, and I'm not in a position to tell somebody, I'm really sorry, but you have 7 months to live. And sometimes that's exactly what I tell my clients. As bad as this is, nobody is sick, and you'll get through this. And there's no better example of that than you, Andreea. You can live through it and become a better person and do more things. But when I see some criminal conduct, that when I meet my clients, they're my clients, so I can't say, what were you thinking about? What were you thinking about? And I don't have to walk you through the fact patterns. I remember I had a call from a medical doctor, and he said, Ron, I need to see you. I said, call my office, make an appointment. He said, no, the FBI is here now. He had filed 11 separate applications for payroll protection money for 11 companies that didn't exist, and he made a long list of employees that were made up. And he stole $3.7 million from the government in the middle of a pandemic. And how do you empathize with that? My job is to minimize the punishment. The idea that somebody's going to sit on the stand and say, I did it, Mr. Russo, your client is not guilty. I'm the one who did. That's Perry Mason. That's television. In the real world, that's a very, very good question. I've never met a client who was as bad as the prosecutor thought they were. And my function is to do my best to bring the client in for a safe landing, is to try to present the parts of their lives that are worthwhile, to put some weight on the other side of the scale. And I'm happy to say that we have a federal judiciary here in New York, whether it's in the Eastern District or the Southern District. Many judges are very sensitive to that. We're not talking about street crime, which is a different, there are many, many reasons for street crime. There's poverty, there's ignorance, there's no education. I get all of that. But there are judges who feel that if you argue, my client has been punished because he lost his medical license, he lost his law license. Some judges will say, I should punish him more harshly because he had all of the advantages. It's very dynamic in terms of your presentation and doing the best you can for clients who are very, very worthwhile. These are not people to throw away. They made a mistake and they've got to pay their deserts for it. But we have to work our way through it. And that's why I'm really honored to assist you, Andreea, and I don't know why we haven't gotten traction with bar associations, because I know the National Association of Criminal Lawyers. There's a lot that we have to do, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do it together. And I'll do everything to do whatever I can for you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I mentioned before, I think the reason why they didn't reply is that my thought process and my presentation wasn't clear in my head enough. So their delay helped me get to improve.
Tell me more about that, Andreea.
Yes. So right now, what I'm working on is a presentation, and I will send it to you shortly, about there are no bad people. There are only unconscious people. And I take that from my own experience. So as you mentioned, there are people who are professionals. They have their own lives and comfortable lives, professions, but they do things that are out of this world. Why? Because they are stuck into the lower portion of the ego, where they're driven by money, by greed, by all the worldly needs. And why I say there are no bad people, because we are all the same. There are people like yourself who has been a professional for so many decades, but aware of integrity and authenticity of why are you doing things, and what would you want to see out of your client, and as a result, for the benefit of society. And there are other people who they only think about themselves. How can I get more money? And they don't stop ever to think, why am I actually doing this? Why do I want more money? And the reason why I'm doing this research and project is to help professionals like me to stop and ask themselves questions. And the threshold, the line, is authenticity. If I get as many people as possible to stop and ask themselves, what do I really want? Why do I want that?
We spoke about this before the podcast. The lawyers, of course, have to take 24 CLE credits, continuing legal education credits. I took a 1-hour program, which I thought was quite excellent. The name of it was Why Good People Do Bad Things. And this follows up on you. They're good people. They just do bad things. And one analysis was that if you took a bell graph, on that curve on one side are people who would not go 50 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone, probably like you. On the other side, there are bad people. There are people who do bad things because they like to do bad things. But the vast majority of us are on this continuum. And whether or not we lack the authenticity, as you put it, along that curve, if somebody is disrespected, if somebody feels entitled, I should have gotten that raise. I'm better than she is. They faulted me. And there's not a lock on the cash drawer. Very often that will be when a good person does something really stupid. Now, I certainly agree with you that the drive for money, the greed, and it's not necessarily the money, but it's obviously what money can buy. You get into this, I hate to say it, but it is typically American issue of keeping up with the Joneses. And when you put that, and people say, well, you know what, I should have a bigger house. I should live in a different zip code. I'd like a bigger car. And instead of being satisfied, being authentic with yourself, that's where you kind of go off the tracks. It really is it's a fascinating part of who we are as human beings, I think.
And I think a lot of times I refuse to believe that someone, this applies more to, like, more personal crimes and physical crimes, but I refuse to believe that someone would do something harmful to another person if they understood the pain that they were inflicting. I refuse to believe that someone would do such a thing. I refuse to believe a parent would hurt their child thinking, if they knew what pain it would inflict on what pain they're inflicting on their own child. I refuse to believe that someone would do such a thing. So I think it's a selfish sort of.
So how do you account for those acts when they do occur? Because every day we pick up the newspaper, we see how people inflict terrible pain on their loved ones.
Right. I think that they do it because of what they want. They're very selfish.
Okay, well that's certainly.
To answer that question, psychologically, people hurt other people because of their own pain.
Right.
As I said, there are no bad people, so nobody does something with the intention of hurting somebody else. In some cases, they're doing to protect themselves.
I mean, there is all that, and there is a great deal, and we see it more and more here in New York City. There's great mental illness. There's great mental illness. I don't want to dwell on it, but this poor woman who was set afire in a train in Coney Island, the person who did that was completely disconnected from their humanity.
Yeah.
They were obviously, because they did that, our society says you are mentally ill. No normal person would have done that. And unfortunately, there are those things. There are random crimes. There are random crimes of violence that I don't know that we'll ever be able to quite understand what causes that. But, I mean, that's beyond what we're trying to do and what your mission is. I love Alive Again. The very statement says so much.
Yeah.
It means that at one point you weren't alive. At one point you weren't authentic. You were doing these things not because you were a bad person, but because you were disconnected from your own authenticity. So I'm with you 100%.
Yes. And
there's one thing that we need to talk about is how do you get the folks that we're trying to reach, the professionals who right now are out there doing stupid things. They're doing criminal things. I know that because tomorrow I'll get a call and some person has just been stopped. So how do we reach those folks?
So at the level of vibration, and if I base my teachings and research on Dr. David Hawking's map of consciousness, right? So people that are stuck in the lower vibrations of money, greed, hate, if we get them to be authentic, because inauthenticity keeps the mind stuck in outer things. Things, as you know, things don't come from the outside. Everything is inside of us. So how do we get them to stop and ask themselves questions is all that is needed. But my question is, are they willing to do that? Because by stopping and asking questions, why am I doing this? They're bringing their attention inwards into their pain. And they start to be aware of their own pain. The reason why they're doing actions is because of their own pain inside. So, are people willing to be aware of their pain and to be aware of where they are?
Well, my sense is that this idea of the folks who notice that are probably well on their way to avoiding a catastrophe. And I think that your goal is so worthy because you're trying to reach the very people who need it most. And that's why I think that your mission should be brought to bar associations. Every now and then, I get a client who comes to me who's wondering whether or not they should keep doing what they're doing. And I remember I had some medical providers come to me many years ago and said, Ron, this is what we're doing. I said, you can't do that. You can't. If you do that, you're going to get arrested. But Ron, we can't make a living because everybody does it. Everybody does it. So how am I? I said, look, I'm just a lawyer. I can only tell you that you're putting yourself at risk. 6 months later, I got a call from them in a hotel room when they were busted by the FBI because they kept doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
In fact, they did it quite consciously. And the reason they did it is because this is our business and everybody's doing it. And what I did at that point, I said to the FBI, I said, let me talk to the agents. I said, let's not announce this. My guys will cooperate with you. If you announce their arrest, they're burned. And so these two gentlemen, I remember them very well, many years ago, wound up assisting the government in basically cleaning up the industry that was full of fraud. So sometimes you meet a client who even knows it, but for whatever reason, continues to do what they're doing. But at least they did it with eyes open. And I would also say that there have been not a few clients and their families who have been very grateful that they wound up being stopped and even that they wound up going to jail. That it was a reset. It was, it's like they always say, reset your computer. It's a complete reset. And their lives have been changed for the better. And they move on with their criminal conviction, but at least they have a better life than what they were doing before. They were always running and running and running. And so, as you're the best example of what good.
What happened to me, I call it a gift. Because, as you said, of your clients, that everybody's doing it, clearly that it's not how it works. If everybody does it, that doesn't mean that it's legal.
Yep.
I had my own signs flashing all over the place, and I didn't stop. I continued because I was afraid.
What were you afraid of, Andreea, when you said?
I was afraid that I would not be able to sustain the expenses and the lifestyle that I have.
Your stature as a lawyer.
Exactly. The image. I will not be able to sustain the image that I created for myself because I myself put the pressure on myself. I set a standard that it was unachievable.
I see.
But because I was stuck in that fear and not understanding that, and now I'm going to get to the spiritual portion of vibration and energy, I didn't know that I was protected and that God had my back always. I felt alone, and if I didn't do anything, then myself and my family would sleep under the bridge. Right. So I felt that it was my duty to do something.
Right.
And it was that misunderstood power that I thought I had that drove me to take all those decisions. But then when the invisible force that God is and universe is, and here I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about the quantum world, that took over my life and gave me this gift of removing myself, my mind, my ego from my life and allowing me to see the beauty of life. That's why I call it a gift.
I understand. That's very well said. Very well said. I think that everybody who goes through this crucible, and that's what a federal indictment that charges by the United States or by the state of New York is really, it's a crucible. And how you come out on the other side depends on how you handle the issue. And we've obviously made pearls out of dirt. They've really done a marvelous job in terms of seeing good and bad. Now, I realize when you get into the issues of good and bad, morality, now you slip into religion and God and the commandments. But, whether you're a believer or not, we have commandments so that we could live together as a society.
Yeah.
sometimes I wonder whether or not that's getting away from us as a society. Or maybe that's beyond our.
Yeah, and going to the classic movie, The Devil Advocate.
Yeah.
You wonder, what does it take for an attorney to always do the good thing? Because you know the scene, I don't know if you remember the movie, and you know the scene in the bathroom when he goes and looks in the mirror and says, I never lose, so I would do anything in my power, even lying and being unauthentic, only to win this case. And then at the end of the movie is the flip coin, where in the same bathroom he thinks, no, I will do the right thing and I would just withdraw from the case because I can't represent this client because I know he's lying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's obviously a serious ethical issue for any lawyer who has done this for any period of time at any level. It's there's a law school exam.
Yeah, and that's why I believe that everything goes back to our own true self, our own authenticity, and how we conduct our lives as to what we believe.
Well, I think it's also true, this is not taught in law school. This is not, and I don't know that it can be taught. I think this starts when a child is born, and it doesn't have to be in a Catholic home, a Jewish home, a Protestant home, but it has to be in a home where people respect one another and people understand. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah. Don't cheat, don't lie, don't steal. I mean, it's pretty basic, but it gets morphed as the issues get larger and the money gets larger and you're on the world stage. And I think the ability to reach even one person as you move forward, you'd save a life. Basically, it would spread. But people can help one another in this regard.
Yeah.
And, I realize that if you're an attorney and you're in corporate practice, civil practice, you go to these meetings where the clients are there. I remember 100 years ago when I was an attorney and we were representing a trade organization, people who produced cardboard boxes. And there had been a consent decree with the United States that we would not fix prices anymore. So you always had a lawyer whenever they met. And I remember being in a room in a hotel where all of these competitors got together and you had to listen to what they were saying and make sure that nobody was suggesting. What I'm saying is that as a civil attorney, there are ways to get clients that way. As a criminal attorney, I don't know a lot of people. I don't know them until after they have been indicted.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no place that you can meet people who commit crimes. And when you do meet these folks at their worst moment, for me, it has always been a very dynamic moment to try to take them from that place. And I don't know any client of mine who's landed quite as well as you have, Andreea.
Thank you.
Many clients have done well. They've come out. They've readjusted their lives and they have better home lives with their wives or their husbands. I say that too, the women that I've represented. But that's you have to work at that. It doesn't happen automatically.
It's not easy.
You've done that. You know that better than anybody.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, because you've seen so many examples, is there a factor that makes you think, oh, I understand why that person landed so well? Is there a factor that somehow they understand what they did, or I don't think I'm expressing myself very...
No, you're expressing yourself so well that I'm not sure I can answer the question. It also has to do with where they are, who they are at the time. Are they in an intact lifestyle? Has their life partner, are they standing by them? Has the home life disintegrated? What kind of relationship do they have with their peers, with their family, with their children? Very often when you see that's intact, it makes the transition easier because you have support. What's difficult is that when you come out of a licensed life, whether you're a radiologist or a medical doctor or a lawyer or a CPA, now you have to start and you don't have that ability to earn what you used to earn, that's an enormous hit. Putting aside what very often is a component of a criminal prosecution is that there's enormous financial burdens put on you. As you probably know, in the federal law, if you commit a financial crime and you steal $1, now you have to pay back $2. Now that doesn't sound like too much unless you've taken $4 million. Then you have to disgorge $4 million. And if you do that, you're back where you started. So that's really not much of a punishment. At least that's the way the United States looks at it. So now in addition to those $4 million, now you have to pay another $4 million. So you wind up, and invariably, there are very few resources when a client hits the rocks. And so they want to be straddled with a multi-million-dollar judgment that they'll live with for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
The United States will take 15% of whatever they earn, and it's an enormous burden moving forward if there's that financial component in addition to the loss of your license. To answer your question, I think it varies. There's no easy answer as to why somebody comes out standing up straight and somebody else really can't get off their knees.
Yeah. And to add to that is it's the issue of identity. I had it myself asking.
Your point is very well taken. Ask Mom that question. How is it that we're sitting here talking about this? What was it in your character that made you stand up straight following what you went through?
Yeah.
Tell me.
And that was the issue of identity. Who am I? Now that I don't have my license, I don't have my freedom, I don't have anything that I've been used to, who am I? And back to my initial research and question, I went to my truth, back to my own truth. Who am I? Before I was an image, now I am truly myself, because nothing that I had brought me any happiness or peace. It was just that identity that I created.
Well said. Now, this is your podcast, so I don't want to ask you questions, but let me ask this question anyway. Have you stayed in touch with any of the women that you met during your incarceration?
Yes, we still have. So we started when the pandemic started, we created a group of prayer in prison. And then when people were released, we still are in contact and we're praying every day.
That's beautiful. Women will do that.
Yeah. And actually I had on my podcast last year, the lady that is leading this group, and every morning at 7:30, she has a prayer line, and a lot of people, both those that were incarcerated and other people, call in and join the prayer line.
That's beautiful.
And it's incredible.
Wonderful. And that continues now?
Yes.
That's great. That's a big difference. That'll make somebody's life different.
Yes. Every day, 7 days a week at 7:30, the prayer line is open for anybody to join.
Well, I'm going to ask you for that.
Of course, I'll give you the number. Yes.
Yeah.
And now that we're well over the time of the episode, I want
realize what was the time? Oh, we're only on. Let's stay here. Come on, this is fun.
I want to ask you, because the name of the podcast is Alive Again. I want to ask you, what activity in your life makes you feel more alive?
In addition to being a lawyer for 50 years, in March, me and my life partner have been married for 50 years. So Diane, who you could not have a better partner for life, and I have been together for 50 years. And being with her makes me happy and peaceful. And no matter what my day is like, when I get home, we sit down and we unwind. There's always a fabulous Italian meal on my table. She's my treasure. And I also have different things over time that I've played serious chess at one point. I have a telescope I enjoy astronomy. I try to stay current in my Italian, and family. I have two beautiful sons who gave me two beautiful grandsons. It's easier to keep your balance when you got so many people holding you up.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Are your sons attorneys as well in the law?
My son is in finance, and I don't even understand what he does. But I do know that he has been involved in a startup, the basic purpose of which has been to provide health care to the underserved communities, the Black and brown communities. I'm very proud of him. He seems to have found the sweet spot where he can really do a lot of good, and I think he's a really authentic guy. Like, boy.
Yeah, I think that's the key to success ultimately, because we all have different standards of what success is, but
Yep.
I think that authenticity is the key to success.
Well, I'm honored to be part of this podcast and to assist in your mission any way that I can. You know that, and it's a pleasure to see your beautiful daughter. Let me make sure that I know where your fashion show is going to be and when it'll be. Diane and I would love to come by. My wife is quite a fashionista herself. So I think that you'd really enjoy meeting her and you could exchange the ideas for shoes.
I'm very excited.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much for the invitation. And
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you our listeners for listening. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe and follow us to hear more real life stories of attorneys and other professionals and how their decisions shape their journeys. Thank you. I'll see you soon.